Welcome to On the Ballot with Ballotpedia, where we connect people to politics by providing neutral, nonpartisan, and reliable information on our government, how it works, and where it's headed.
Hello and welcome to On the Ballot. I'm Norm Leahy, your host. I'm a senior editor here at Ballotpedia. And joined today, special episode. It's our 200th episode of the show. We have more in the can than Seinfeld, but we are trailing a long way. Cheers, one of my favorite shows. But joining me today for this special occasion is the boss, the CEO, founder of Ballotpedia, Leslie Graves. Leslie, welcome to the 200th episode of On the Ballot.
Norm, thanks for having me on this morning. Parks and Rec is my benchmark for success.
Yeah, I would say that we will never have as many episodes as The Simpsons, but they should have died a long time ago. But all that aside, let's talk about something. We've discussed a lot of things, you and I, offline, about long-term goals for the organization. And you like to think long-term. And one of those goals you said is a 10, well, it's about 9.5 years now. And that's by 2034 to have the organization, Ballotpedia, covering all, 500 and almost 20,000 elections in the United States. About how many do we cover right now, and how are we going to get to complete coverage everywhere?
Thanks for asking. So Ballotpedia is about 18 years old now, and for the first 5 years of our existence, we only covered ballot measures. And our goal with covering ballot measures always was to be one-stop shopping and for our readers to be able to dive into that article and find out any last little thing they could possibly want to know about that ballot measure. And as we grew over time, we realized that we could do that also for members, U.S. House elections, U.S. Senate elections, also state legislative and statewide elected officers, governor, secretary of state, and so forth. So we gradually expanded to cover all of those elections. And we didn't add presidential election coverage until 2015. But and the ethos was the same, neutral coverage, one-stop shopping, so people could get the whole thing in the article that we had. But all of those people is only about 10,000 elected lawmakers. And as we all know, when we go to vote, you get in there and you vote for president, you vote for U.S. Senate, if it's up, U.S. House, and maybe governor and state treasurer. And then right around maybe state treasurer, most people, even people who are very highly informed voters, are like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Who are these other people? I don't even know if I know what that office is. The average November ballot across the country has 17 contests on it, and most people don't know who those people are that are running for those offices. And also, then it's also the case that there are elections other than in November, what are known as off-cycle elections. So in many states, the elections for school board, city council, and so on are held in February or March or May or April. A lot of people don't even know that there is an election, so they don't vote. The voter turnout in those elections is typically less than 10%. So there's a lot of stuff that people don't know. And it's all of those down ballot people who are the local elected officers. As you pointed out, there are about roughly 520,000 local elected lawmakers. Just to break that down a little bit, that would be your countywide people, so county commissioners. It would be the people who sit on the governing board of cities and towns, mayors, city council members, and so on. It would be school boards. There are 13,500 school districts across the country that elect their school board. There are 83,000 elected school board members. There are also elected judges in nearly every state. And forgetting about the state Supreme Court or other appellate courts, state courts in that state, many of the people who you would, whose courtrooms you would show up in, if there's a family matter, a drunken driving arrest, or also a homicide, many of those judges are elected. And many people also don't know who those people are. When you're looking at the ballot, you're like, what?
Yeah.
Or people. These are the judges, right? So there are about 520,000 of them, and it's very hard for most people to achieve what they regard as adequate information about who these people are, what they stand for, and what would happen if I elected them. So that's our 10-year goal, is to solve that problem. And to solve that problem, we need to know when those elections are, because again, many of them are not in November. They're scattered all over the calendar. And then we need to know the names of the people who are on the ballot. And then there's a lot of other information that our readers want and need to have before they feel comfortable casting an informed vote.
And that other information, you have a column that runs in the Daily Broom on Fridays, and internally it's called Climbing Mount Everest because we have code names for things. Um, but it really does, the one of the things we talked about there was the candidate connection survey, and that's this information that we talk about a lot that really it gets beyond the sound bites and the placards and talks about who these candidates are, and but it's also there's a real benefit here for candidates, isn't there?
Yeah. um, just do a little bit of math with you, Norm. Um, the if we spent the amount of money that our staff that that it costs for us to cover president, U.S. Senate, U.S. House, and all those other 10,000 races I mentioned, if we covered each of the elections for city council or mayor or school board the same way that we cover those elections, where we go and procure a massive amount of information and put it into the article, um, it would cost about $500 million a year. So
Mhm.
we would have to raise $500 a year. So that's not going to happen anytime soon. So therefore, when we think about how can we solve the problem of providing readers with enough information about two people running against each other for school board or city council, how are we going to do that? There has to be a way of doing that that's scalable and that really gives voters that they feel like, okay, I read this, now I know which one of these two candidates aligns with what I believe. And there are 5 different types of information like that, but the preeminent one is what we call a candidate connection survey. We've been doing it since 2018, but we're accelerating our outreach to candidates. So it is the case that when a candidate fills out our candidate connection survey, it is so revealing, and the people who do fill them out are so open and generous with sharing their thoughts that if you read the contrasting surveys for 2 competing candidates, it would 99% of voters would be like, "Okay, not that one.
Yeah.
Yes, that one." So the survey is it's really great. It's a great instrument.
And but it gets
So
beyond just who you
go ahead.
are, really. It talks about,
Yeah. Mhm.
what's your favorite book?
Yeah.
If who's your favorite superhero, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It really does offer nuance and candor and context that no other survey does.
Well, and also candidates are tremendously they when we put it out there for candidates to fill in, we say there are 5 questions that are you have to fill out. You have to answer at least something about what your positions are on several issues, but the rest of them are optional. So the typical candidate who fills out all of the answers, they might spend 60 or 90 minutes on it, but the product or the for the voter is intensely interesting because it does have all those more open-ended questions that allow the candidate to really kind of share on a deeper level about who they are and where they're coming from.
And so let's say that everything works out, we all do our jobs, and
Mhm.
we're able to cover all of these races everywhere in America in 2034. And we have what internally we call robust information, which is we know
Yeah.
more than just your name. What else do we know about you?
Right. So, the pieces of information that we think we need to get about local candidates, we call them hyperlocal if they're school board or town board or whatever. By the way, there are 19,000 cities in America, so that's a lot of city council members. So robust information would be that they filled out the survey and sent it to us. Another way of doing that is sometimes, but increasingly less often, with the decline of the news media, it used to be when I was young that you could count on your local newspaper to do pretty comprehensive coverage of even very down ballot candidates. That you can no longer count on that. It's evaporating from the news media because it's one of the first expenses that goes when they're having to lay people off in their newsroom. So that used to be available. It's less available now. But if there still are some bigger cities that the newspaper is able to do surveys, so that we can point our readers to those surveys if they do exist. Other pieces of robust information is, what did the candidate get endorsed by a group? Now, who might endorse a local candidate? Well, just making up two examples, they might be endorsed by the local teachers union
Hmm.
if they're running for school board, or they might be endorsed by an entity called the Orange County Conservative Club, right? And so, regardless of which entity endorsed them, most people can say, "Oh, they were endorsed by the Orange County Conservative Club. Well, then I'm voting for them," or I'm never casting a vote for that person.
Yeah.
Or they would have the same reaction to an endorsement by the local teachers union. It would help them decide which candidate they want to jump for. So getting information about which local organizations endorse is another thing that we're doing, and we love the local endorsing organizations. There's a patchwork quilt of them all over the United States. They don't get very much coverage, but they're intensely valuable to their followers and members, because their staff, often volunteers,
Hmm.
does that deeper research to find out who aligns with that organization's values. So that's intensely valuable for their followers. And then if we can share that information, that's really helpful. Another piece of information that's really useful is, there are a lot of political organizations that ask candidates for public office to sign a pledge.
Right.
So the pledge could be, if I'm elected, I pledge to do a $3.5 million project to fill in all the potholes in our town of 1,500 people. That might be a local community group that asks them to sign that pledge. And then there are bigger pledges, ever higher levels of politics. But if the candidate signed a pledge, that's very useful for our readers. It gives you some information about them.
Yeah.
So those are endorsement information, pledge information, and then surveys, whether it's our survey or other people's surveys, are what we are referring to as robust information. So as we march down the field to covering every single hyperlocal election, even if it's a village of 100 people, those are the key pieces of information we're looking for.
So this will be the last question, because I know you're busy, and I think if we get all this information, we're able to
Yeah.
cover all of the races.
Yeah.
We have complete, robust information for everybody.
Yeah.
Do you think it will make a difference in how people engage with politics? And
Oh, yeah.
conversely,
I mean, really,
politicians with voters?
that's a great question. I mean, there are two reasons that I find this highly motivational. One is that, like, if you're going to go to a town, if I drive to a town 2 hours north of me, and I want to know in advance where I'm going to get coffee when I'm there, I can find that out in 13 seconds on Yelp.
Yeah.
So for anything I want to know, anywhere I want to go, it should be that easy for political candidates at all levels of the ballot. So part of my motivation is that what we aspire to have for our readers, it just should be the case that it's available. But the other reason is that as we are starting to cover local candidates and interact with them, we recently did extensive interviews with 100 school board members across the country. We are convinced that as the American public gets to know who these people are who run for local office, they will admire them no matter what their political ideology is. They're admirable in many, many ways. These local people are participating in the great American experiment in self-governance and democracy. But when most of us in the public think about politics, we don't think about them. We think about this stuff up here, and a lot of people that makes them unhappy
Yeah.
when they think about this. Our readers will, we believe, be inspired and really enjoy getting to know these 500,000 people. They're really wonderful people. So we want that story to be known, so that people have more. The great American reading public can develop that sense of admiration for these people and the great American experiment in self-governance that we have started as we start to see them at Ballotpedia.
It's going to be a long journey, but
Yes.
I think it's not only worthwhile, but we invite everybody to join along with us. Leslie Graves, the CEO, founder, and my boss here at Ballotpedia.
Ah.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on this morning, Norm. Yep. Have a great day. Yep. Bye-bye.
And we'll be back soon with another episode of On the Ballot. Until then, check us out on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, I'm Norm Leahy, and we'll see you in the digital pages of Ballotpedia. Take care.